I think he did.
Yeah. 1 second.
Okay. I will call the meeting to order. It is 1 p.m. Thank you everyone for joining us for this special meeting of the Municipal Heritage Committee. Today we have a single topic on our agenda, which is the application for Springfield House Complex. Adoption of the agenda. We do have quorum. May I have a motion and a seconder to adopt? Keith and James, thank you. Any questions, comments, additions, changes? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We do have the minutes from the last Heritage Committee meeting on July 5th. May I have a mover and seconder for the confirmation of the minutes? James, mover. Yeah. And Keith, thank you. Any additions, changes, corrections? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof. I haven't received any. Did anyone want to declare at this point? Okay, not seeing any. Delegations, presentations. We don't have any scheduled, but I'm sure we will have a little bit of discussion with the application. So that brings us to the business at hand. Item 7.1. Heritage permit application for Springfield House, 1365 County Road 2. And at this point, I'll ask Ms. Vendetti if staff will have any comments.
Staff have reviewed the application, have no concerns. It's very similar to what was requested for the town hall. So I would defer to the Director of Operations and the consultant, Michael Scott, to provide an overview of the application to the committee.
Thank you. Michael, do you want to speak to what we're proposing for the exterior of the building? Are you?
Sure. Sorry, just unmuting myself.
I think you're muted.
Yeah. Am I okay now? Yeah, you can hear me? Yep. Excellent. So there are three main scopes on the exterior of the building that we're proposing. So essentially what we want to do is tie it in with the work that's being done on Escott next door. So we propose to replace the roof, which has exceeded its life expectancy. We propose to carry out conservation on the exterior woodwork, principally the windows and doors, but also some of the other woodwork on the building. And then we plan to carry out a quite limited scope on the masonry on the building as well. And then there's some other work, foundation waterproofing and structural reinforcement of the ground floor, which is not subject to the heritage permit, I don't think. Are there any immediate questions about that? Or if not, I can describe in a little more detail the three scopes we're proposing.
Maybe you want to talk about the materials that we're using. I think that's likely what everybody's looking for in terms of, you know, tying it in with we're looking to use the same materials as what was proposed on the Escott facility for roofing. Same remediation efforts for the soffit and fascia, the windowsills, etc. Try to refurbish the existing storm windows as much as possible, and then replace what does have to be replaced that can't be refurbished. I think that.
Am I able to share my screen? Did I in fact just do that?
Yes.
Oh, I was not actually intending to do it instantly without speaking further. But anyway, apparently when you start PowerPoint, it just automatically shares your screen. Can everyone see the photo of the front elevation here?
Actually, you haven't shared your screen.
Okay, then something slightly odd just happened and it just took over. I see it just took over the Zoom screen. Let's go back and try to share the screen in a more straightforward way. There. How about that? Does that show the front elevation?
Yes.
Okay, give me 1 second to get Zoom back up so that I can see everyone. Completely failed. We'll just go with this. Anyway, so this is the front elevation of the building. You can see the existing roof is utility grade metal roofing with a more recent, I would think, snow fence running across it. Just try that again. This is a close-up of the edge of the roof. It's interesting to note that this is an older layer of metal roofing. There's a new wood deck that's been added on top, and then the existing metal, visible metal roofing on top as well. And then, of course, the gutter in front. So our proposal is to strip off the top metal roof, to strip off the layer of new decking to expose this former layer of metal roofing. At that point, we would document what's there in case it's of historic interest, and then remove the lower level of metal roofing, make any necessary repairs to the roof deck at that time, probably using plywood rather than board decking in kind. And then we would put on a new metal roof. The new metal roof is intended to resemble this one. It would probably be a Vic West roofing. Vic West Super Vic is what was previously specified for Escott Hall. We can go with that, or we might change for both buildings to Barnmaster here, which is another Vic West product that's very similar, as you can see, and maybe has a slightly subtler profile and resembles what's on the building now a bit more. Otherwise, we would install a modern roofing assemblies, so ice and water shield at the eaves and a waterproof breathable underlayment throughout, which should ensure long-term waterproofness of the assembly. That's about it for the roofing. Oh, and then we would replace the gutters and downspouts. The main thing to note there is that the new downspouts will drain away from the building properly to reduce water infiltration to the bases of the walls. Is there anything else in the short term that people would like to hear with regards to the roof?
We do have a question.
Yeah.
Keith?
Hi, it's Keith Fly here. Through you, Mr. Chair. My question is, if when you strip the existing visible metal roof off, and I assume it's just strapped underneath, and then you discover that it's period metal shingles, what would be the process after that?
We would certainly document what's there and investigate thoroughly. Roofing is one of those difficult things because even if we discover that the roofing that we've uncovered has significant heritage value, you can't really restore it and leave it. We might consider, though, at that point, strapping over it, putting a new higher level of decking on, much as has been done now, and re-roofing over it if we determined that there was something there that had a significant heritage value.
I guess really my question would be, if it turns out to be period metal shingles, I think there are metal shingles available now that are similar to that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That is a more sensible question. And yes, it might well be at that point that we could make a turn in our approach and consider replicating what's there with the visible roof if we had proper evidence for it.
But I think I'm correct in asking this. None of this is described in the designation bylaw for this building, right? Roofing, windows, nothing.
The
That's correct.
designation bylaw is, yeah, not very detailed.
If I could just add to that, one of the
Yeah.
things that's in the work plan in terms of the restoration of these buildings is an updated statement of cultural significance. So all of the things that are found during this process could feed into an updated statement of cultural heritage significance as well.
Just a follow-up on your question. Are you asking that consideration be given as part of this redevelopment, that if metal shingles are found, that the option be given to replace, as opposed to the Vic West roofing pattern? If there's a metal shingle pattern, perhaps they can also look at that. Is that your suggestion?
Well, as I said, because none of it's described in the bylaw, we really can't insist on that. And in fact, if we want to be truthful about this, I'm sure that the original roof on this building was cedar shakes. So, you know, where do we go?
For consistency between the two buildings, I think we would like to mirror what we put on one building to be on the other as well for consistency. And, you know, this is one property, so I think having one sort of view of what it looks like would be ideal for us for maintaining it going forward.
Maybe it, go ahead.
I was just going to make the comment that if you are treating it as one property and considering two similar roofs in terms of profile, that we at least consider two different colors rather than having same color. Just for aesthetics.
And what will be the color?
Truthfully, I'm not sure that we had got quite that far in our thoughts. David, I don't know if you'd had any thoughts on color. I haven't given it a ton of consideration yet. Except that potentially the existing red actually looks pretty nice on the building, and matching it might not be the worst strategy.
Yeah, I agree. I think that matching the red would look nice. And we can certainly consider a secondary color as well too. Yeah, definitely, we can do that.
Marcus,
Yes.
it's Councillor Grell here online. I was going to ask Michael. I had the thought as Mr. Sly was talking about the style of roof and the many layers. Is it a reasonable thought to say, okay, we're going to replace the roofing, but can you save a section of it and kind of frame it up and say, hey, this is what was there? Is that ever done in this sort of application? Thank you.
I mean, certainly it is with materials of significant historic interest. You know, whether the existing top roof layer is necessarily that interesting is, you know, maybe a bit debatable. It might make more sense with the underlayer, especially if it turns out to be something, yeah, like a tin roof of some sort, or metal shingles that have some interest for sure. If it's simply a question of salvaging a piece of the existing red metal roof that you can see in the image, I mean, we could certainly do that if there was interest in hanging it on the wall, etc. But it probably doesn't itself have much in the way of heritage value. It's not that old.
No, I was thinking of the underlayers
Yeah.
that may present themselves, but thank you very much. Thank you.
As we did our walk through the building as well, and I know it's not relevant for the heritage approvals, we had looked at the interior materials of the building as well, and had I think a suggestion had been made that we do the same sort of thing, like a portal window showing the construction of the interior walls, what they were with the lath and plaster, where we will be insulating and building it to current standards, just to show some of that history as well too. And I think we may have spoken about a section of the flooring as well too, if I'm not mistaken, right, Michael?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, when the insulation scope is maybe more relevant for Escott than here. Because I don't think we were planning to do that work on the interior of this building right away, or potentially at all, because the upstairs are sort of museum pieces, right?
Yes, no, sorry, I was referring to Escott, just for information
Yeah.
that we are looking at these types of things with this project as well, too.
Yeah. But certainly at Escott, yeah, that would be a nice touch.
Are there any other questions or comments on the roofing?
Okay.
All right.
Do we want to keep going, Michael? Do you have more that you would like to present to me?
Yeah, so we can look at the wood on the building as well. So the wood on the building consists basically of the windows and the doors, and then the fascia and the soffit. And then the new addition on the back, the one-story addition, is also wood. So a lot of the wood on the building is actually in fairly good condition. These are some typical photos. You can see a typical window with the storm window in front. In general, the exposed window casings and the wood sills have, the paint is failing, and there's some surface deterioration of the wood, but I didn't find any significant rot where there was, significant loss of material or areas that would have to be reconstructed in any way. The storm windows are in poorer condition. Excuse me. They have more or less lost paint all over their surfaces. Most of them have some deterioration in these lower corners in particular. And in some cases, there was like a moderate degree of rot at these joint locations. The windows inside, as you might expect, because they're protected by the storm windows, are in much better condition with fairly intact paint and no signs of decay that I noted. I wasn't able to access the majority of them from the outside because they're above grade, etc. But there is some failure of the glazing putty and loss, etc. They need to be repainted. And then there are 3 wood doors on the building, I guess, 2 on one opening and this one. None of them were in particularly poor condition. They need to be painted. There may be a little light deterioration of the wood, but I don't think anything that simply cleaning up the paint, scraping, sanding, and repainting won't take care of. I did note that the siding on the modern addition at the back of the building, which is not directly related to the Heritage Committee, I guess, but nevertheless, there is some rot on it in various areas, and that should be addressed. We probably would do that at the same time as we're doing the historic woodwork on the building because you have the same trades on site. The other thing that requires replacement, likely, let me just switch to a photograph here. The wood fascia at the high levels in the building is in quite poor condition. You saw it in the other photo of the roof edge, but you can see the gable end here as well. The wood is checked and split. I think what you're looking at there is the underlying layer of metal that's been lapped down as a flashing. But I would expect that we will just replace the fascia all the way around the building. It's a plain undecorated board fascia, and it doesn't have any detailing that would merit heroic efforts to save it. The soffit and the frieze board on the face of the building appear to be in good condition and would probably just be painted. The soffit, I do not think is original. Going back to the windows, I would note as well that I do not believe either the storm windows or the window sashes are original. I think they're replacements. Certainly the storm windows. And in any case, our proposed scope for restoration would be basically scraping and painting with probably very limited use of wood filler in some areas where there's been surface deterioration. And then for the storm windows where they're in poorer condition, we would probably, rather than trying to rebuild the damaged areas with epoxy, we would either cut out areas of wood and replace them, or subject to confirmation that the storm windows are not in fact original, we might just replicate new matching storm windows and replace them in a few cases where they're in the worst condition. I think that's a basic summary of the wood condition and our approach to it. Questions?
Questions from the committee?
Art?
Yeah, I think I can confirm that the storm windows are not original. I think they were built at the time of the restoration, 1980 or so. And I have done considerable remedial work on them myself about 15 years ago. I wondered when you talked about window sills and door sills, if it had been considered that they might be clad in aluminum to prevent further rot, or as a way of preserving the original, just to protect it from the weather.
I mean, that's always a difficult question because you're preserving them, but then you're also altering the appearance of the building. I mean, my recommendation would be to protect them with a good coat of paint and try to maintain the paint at intervals so that we preserve the appearance as well as trying to preserve the wood. It's worth noting as well that only a portion of the sills on the building are wood. About half of them or more are masonry of some sort, presumably stone. With the sort of limited time that I have had so far to look at the building, I have not been able to determine which came first, the stone sills or the wood sills. I would guess probably the wood sills, but any other thoughts or questions?
Sorry, can I go
Yep.
back to the thought of cladding the sills in aluminum? I think that can be done without changing the appearance or the architectural effect of it. And as long as they're not sealed on the bottom side so that they can drain and be somewhat ventilated. I think it just, I think it's a remedial treatment without changing the appearance.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I've done in the past in a similar occasion, and my general feeling is that if you paint historic wood of this sort, it should last a long time. Like it's already lasted, no doubt over 100 years. Having said that, I mean, yes, it could be clad, either fully clad in aluminum, or you could put an aluminum. Well, it's difficult because then you end up having to try to seal the aluminum against the casing, et cetera, in such a way that no water ever penetrates through. So there's risk as well as benefit. I don't know. I would prefer to go with painting.
With the increase in intensity of the sun and the decrease in effectiveness of modern paint, I think the aluminum, we're sort of forced into the aluminum option, but that's just my opinion.
I think we can take that into consideration as we move forward and select what treatments we're going to do. I made a note of it here as well too, so we'll have a chat about that with our group and see what makes sense.
Yeah, and we can look at details that might work successfully for that approach, certainly.
James?
Just another observation about fascia. You made the statement that they were flat boards, and I'm not 100% certain on this, but I was just wondering whether there's another piece of molding on top that would need to be replaced as well. And I noticed on the ridge or the bottom ends of what would be rafters,
Oh,
They're all on angles and a lot of the eaves troughing is actually on little blocks. Obviously, all those were additions later on, but would that look be maintained?
I mean, essentially, yes. It's a difficult detail, obviously, because, they put in, I think on the other side of the building, they're wood, but this is the front of the building, and they appear to be just bent pieces of gutter metal that have been used to space it off because the fascia is at an angle. We would certainly, if the existing fascia is at an angle, we would replace it with a new angled fascia. I will probably do a slightly different detail from this to support the gutter. Like, I think probably what we will do is put in an angled fascia to match the original historic fascia. And then we would add another piece of wood that's slightly recessed, that's been ripped at an angle the length of the building so that the gutter is fully supported. But essentially, we would be replacing the fascia with a new one that matches the existing original one exactly. And then doing whatever we need to do outboard of that to support the gutters.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the woodwork?
One brief question regarding the underside of the eaves. And I mean, these older buildings, there's absolutely no ventilation. Is anything going to be done about providing some ventilation as part of this project?
I mean, that's an interesting question. Obviously, modern roofing practice is to provide ventilation. If we were doing extensive restoration up in these areas, I might suggest trying to put in a concealed vent detail down the edge. But having said that, we're not doing extensive work up here. And we're not changing the insulation levels in the attic, etc. And so I don't actually think that there's any pressing need to add new attic ventilation or any real benefit to doing so. And so my inclination is to leave well enough alone and leave it as is. That's sufficient answer.
No, I was just a comment, really.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? If not, I understand there's a third part to the scope.
Yeah, masonry. I should mention here that the work on this project is divided up between me and Tacoma Engineering, the heritage structural specialists, and the masonry is really part of their scope, not part of mine. And they did a conditions assessment of it in 2021, but they have not yet gone back to do a detailed assessment prior to our putting documents together. So they may have a few additional comments beyond what I'm going to mention, but at any rate, I can proceed with what we know currently and my thoughts on it. So this is a typical end view of the building. As you can see from here, and if I zoom in, you can see in a little more detail. In general, the masonry is in very good condition, at least as viewed from the exterior. A lot of the problems you see on historic buildings, such as deterioration of the mortar under the downspout, are not present here. The building has obviously been repointed and relatively recently. The structural engineers think that there have probably been a number of different repointing campaigns on it, and certainly there are a bunch of different mortars visible. Some of them probably more appropriate than others, but whether the mortar that's been used for repointing is the perfect choice or not, there are no signs of distress such as spalling stone faces or anything like that that would suggest that there's a problem related to poorly chosen masonry or mortar rather. I don't think there's any extensive areas of repointing required, at least not on the exterior. There's no replacement of any stone that's required. There's a little localized repair, and then there's significant cracking in a number of places on the building. It's a little hard to see in this photo, but there's a crack right there. There's a crack in this stone sill. The cracking continues up here. There's a crack here continuing down. And on the opposite corner of the building, both sides of the corner, and actually the other gable end, there's fairly extensive cracking as well. Here's a close-up of one example of a crack. And you can see that in addition to cracking down here, it looks like the joint has opened up against the wood window frame as well. The structural engineers in their 2021 assessment did not attribute this to any fundamental problems with the building. They think it's likely a result of these flat arches at the window openings not performing well. They'll reassess. They may find slightly greater problems to be addressed. But as a summary of what's actually going to be recommended, essentially what we're going to do is repair the cracks, which means cutting out and repointing at the crack locations only. We may end up using helical ties, which are sort of stainless steel pins that get driven in at an angle through the mortar joints to tie the masonry together at the cracks. That's a structural engineering detail they would have to decide. And then there would be some other localized repair of the mortar. You can see, for example, at this window corner that there's some deterioration here. Also, I think all of the window and door openings have been finished tight up against the wood with mortar. In some cases, it's manifestly an inappropriate mortar. If I was to flip back to the photo of the front door, you can see here that this is a very dark gray mortar that's been used to finish around the front door moldings. I think we will likely remove that. And even though it may not be quite as historically appropriate, probably replace it with a caulking detail, which might actually serve to keep water out of the wood at that location. But that's the extent of the exterior masonry work that we're going to carry out. There's possibly more in the basement. There are some areas of the basement foundation, by no means the whole thing, where there's significant mortar loss. This is a big crack as well running through. So there may be more work done on the interior faces. And similarly, if we're waterproofing the foundations, we will likely do, depending on condition, either partial or full repointing of the walls below grade prior to installing the waterproofing. But that's about it. And in terms of the specifications for the mortar work, we'll follow what's already been specified for Escott Hall, which is essentially lime mortar. King HLM 350 is what they're proposing for repointing, which is, you know, a good modern best practice for repointing historic buildings. And then the specifications go into great detail about the methods for cutting out and pointing. You guys have probably already seen them for Escott Hall. I can certainly provide them for your review if you like. But I mean, I think the key points are that the masons doing the work have to be qualified heritage specialist masons, that we're requesting written description of them for all their procedures of work, followed by mock-ups of all the key areas, cutting out and pointing essentially in this building. And then proper protection of the pointing work after it's done by keeping it under wet burlap for the appropriate period of time, etc. And so that'll all be carefully supervised and reviewed by Tacoma Engineering, who have a lot of experience managing construction on heritage masonry, and should get you a very good result, especially given the limited amount of work we need to do. One other thing worth mentioning is that when David and I were looking at the building a couple of weeks ago, we did note that there's what appears, well, there's sand, which is presumably deteriorated mortar, has been falling out of some of the interior window casings. And it does suggest that while the masonry on the exterior face looks to be in very good condition, it may not be in such great condition on the inside of the walls. And so we'll be having a little discussion about that, but we may do one or more small test openings just to see what's going on there and confirm that the mortar is in good condition through most of the body of the wall. That makes sense. So I think that's all I have to say. If there are any questions.
Keith?
Hi, it's Keith. I just have a question regarding the below grade masonry work, the exterior works, particularly on the north face of the building, which is so close to the highway, which it seems to me, I mean, the highway, particularly during the wintertime, a lot of salt, snow, everything gets thrown fairly close to the building. Is there any provision to put perimeter drains in or anything that's going to protect or take some of that stuff away from the stone foundation?
Yeah, certainly. So the full program is actually waterproofing and regrading. So after the waterproofing is done, there'll be regrading done around the building to assist in having water drain away from the building, which it currently doesn't. So that's one thing that we're doing to address that. The second is that the waterproofing around the building, the full assembly is to excavate down to the footings, do any repointing work that's required, and then typically to put a cement parging onto the surface of the wall. Then the waterproof membrane goes onto the parging, and then a dimpled drainage board, and that would be connected to new weeping tile around the building, which will run to a sump pump and then be pumped somewhere suitable well away from the building. So essentially, yeah, there'll be perimeter drainage right around the building, as well as waterproofing to prevent moisture being wicked into the wall beyond. We will likely also insulate the foundations at the same time with rigid styrofoam insulation. There's very little reason not to do that, and it provides an additional protective benefit.
In addition to the scope for the structural and architects, we have also engaged a civil engineer to address all of the site grading for both Escott and Springfield House to make sure that the water does get away on the surface as well too. We've got it sorted.
Just a question based upon the level of intervention into the soil. Are you going to be doing archaeology as well?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, that's a point that has not yet come up in our discussions. But I think, I mean, David, unless you have a different feeling, I think that question would maybe be something where we should seek the opinion of an archaeological advisor on whether that's worthwhile.
Absolutely. I think that it would be in our
Yeah.
best interest to do so. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Are we correct in understanding that some of this work is going to start this fall?
Subject to approval, our hope was certainly to start some of the exterior work in 2024, to allow, you know, the building envelopes to be waterproof so that we can start the interior work through the winter into the spring, and get archives back into the archives facility and, you know, get this project finalized.
Yeah, certainly the roof is the first thing probably that we would ask the contractors to address. And that's the easiest one to do because it's less subject to weather constraints. The masonry is the opposite. It's the hardest to do in cold weather, and so would maybe be done somewhat later.
I was wondered how this would be coordinated with the town hall. Like, will they happen consecutively, or all in the same period?
Yes, thank you. So our intent with this, the reason that we're here for this building, we've already come and received approval for Escott. Just in our conversations, we felt that it would be advantageous for us to have, you know, similar trades on site to deal with some of the common elements of both buildings at the same time. There'd be economy and scale as a result of that. So that's what we're hoping to achieve is, you know, we have to do a roof on both buildings. It doesn't make sense to have contractors mobilize in twice and do two different buildings with two different projects. Similarly, you know, once we finally engage some of these specialty trades once we have them there, let's take advantage of that and try to accomplish as much as possible. So that is the intent of this process.
I was happy to hear that something like the roofs would be addressed first, because we have pieces of aluminum sheeting off the town hall roof on the grass over by the trailer.
So the timing for this, once we have approval from the Heritage Committee and then also council, our hope is to have something out. I think we were shooting for September, that we could possibly take it to the October or November council meeting for approval and then proceed with the project at that point.
And I certainly, Jerry and I, the structural engineer and I have discussed structuring the tenders so that the contractors proceed with the roofing work, like as soon as they get approval to proceed. That does seem like the first thing that should be done.
So we are hoping to achieve some of the exterior work in 2024 still. But I have a sense of what the scope of the larger project is so that we can budget for it in 2025 as well.
And is there a crystal ball that'll tell you when we'd be able to move in again?
I think Michael can speak to that likely better than me in terms of timing, but I think our hope was interior work through the winter, if I'm not mistaken, right, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult to say, but I mean, my sense of this is that it's more than 6 months and less than a year, which is like a vague answer, but that's kind of typical for construction scheduling. So if you think of it as maybe like around a 9-month project, then you think that it would be completed sometime for move-in next summer. It's a bit of a random guess, but I suspect that something along that line is what would work out.
Thanks.
Maybe a little sooner for the interior if we make that a priority.
Any other questions and comments? At this point, is someone willing to try a motion?
Written up already?
We do have a version. That the Municipal Heritage Committee recommends that council approve an application for the alteration to a heritage property 1365 County Road 2, Springfield House, for the scope of work described in the report dated August 2nd, 2024, prepared by Tacoma Engineers on behalf of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands as follows. Masonry repairs to the damaged masonry units and surrounding mortar, remove and replace the existing steel roof, and recoat all exterior wood and door trim, including localized repairs where required.
So move.
Perfect. Second, so Keith and Art. Any further discussion, comment?
Marcus, has the drainage issue, would that be part of what we're discussing, or has that already been taken care of? The excavation and redoing the foundation, is that part of the masonry?
Good question. Doesn't see, does the masonry repairs, I don't think it referred to the foundation. I'd have to double check that.
David, would that be wise to put that in this at this time if we're going, eventually in front of council, or would that require a little more financial update?
I note that was part of the plan for 2024. Part of the work plan was for foundation repairs. So if it's something that can be added on, then certainly we should be at this time.
Yeah, the foundation and waterproofing should be added.
Okay, let's add it.
Do you consider that a friendly amendment?
Sure.
Pardon?
Would we move the same? Is that what you're saying?
That's fine. I guess my question is, I mean, the motion refers to the report done by Tacoma, and that particular part of the project is not described in that report, or yes?
Um, yeah, I don't know that it was initially in as part of that, but it's something that we have been working on at the same time.
Then I think we should include it in the motion. The description of the work on the foundation and the perimeter drainage should be included in the motion.
So there's another part of that question as well, is there not, that would we improve the grading on the drainage right across the side road? Like to get the drainage from the basement level of Springfield House to get a gravity drain across the side road.
No, so
Um,
the drainage from the foundation of the Springfield house will go into the sump pump pit, which will then be pumped up to the surface, and we're surface draining it down to the ditch at that point. We're able to achieve positive drainage from the building.
And then would that be remedied, you know, with a gravity drain at some point in the future?
Surface drainage, surface gravity drainage.
Just surface.
Yes. Yeah. Is that considered part of the heritage, Marnie? Dealing with surface drainage, is that considered as part of this?
Sorry, when you look at the bylaw doesn't speak to the grading or drainage of the property.
Right.
So if we've got the repair of the foundation, and the waterproofing of the foundation, the grading of the property is something that we can take under separate advisement.
The building is suffering, I think, from alterations to the exterior grade since it was built, you know, mostly because of the highway going so close, and every time they rebuild the highway, they raise it another 6 or 8 inches. So it's become, the water has become captive there because of evolution of the highway. So I was hoping at some point in the future, maybe there'd be a concerted effort to improve that drainage. I don't know what that consists of, but
So the road is actually super elevated in the opposite direction with the curve. The way that the county has now built the road up, any surface drainage on the surface of the road itself actually goes to the north and is captured and then ends up in the ditch grade. The water that we're capturing on the property is from the edge of the shoulder to the front of the building. So we're looking to address that with surface drainage to get it away from the building, and then having the waterproofing and the subdrain should capture anything that infiltrates into the surface as well too.
the site is subject to drainage problems, you know, just as the name implies. Springfield is the field behind there is full of springs apparently, and the groundwater is a problem. Probably always has been, and it's just exacerbated by the highway.
Certainly every time the power goes out, I'm aware of why they call it Springfield House. Yeah, we've been working diligently to try to, you know, keep power to the sump pumps and keep things moving. So I'm really hopeful that this project will help address some of those issues that we keep seeing.
Question for David and Marnie. I did mention the archaeology. Would it be useful to reference that, particularly if you need a budget support for that?
We could. I think it's something that we're going to have to do anyways, regardless. Before we
I'll put it
proceed
in the
with-
context of the foundation with archaeology as needed. So I'm just going to confirm with Keith and Art, they're okay with the revised motion, which is that the 4 things are masonry repairs to damaged masonry units and surrounding mortar, remove and replace existing steel roof, recoat all exterior wood and door trim, including localized repairs where required, and foundation repair and waterproofing and perimeter drainage with archaeological work as needed.
Sounds fine.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm just going to jump back to the agenda. Staff update. I don't know if there's anything staff wish to draw attention to.
Not at this time, no.
Perfect. A council update. Okay, I think that was a no. Any other business? Not seeing any. May I have mover and seconder to adjourn? James and Art. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, everyone, for the special meeting.
Oh. How are things going?
Thanks, everybody.
Cemetery? Yep. Who's looking after me?